Come see us on tour in Los Angeles, Honolulu, Dallas, Texas, Baltimore, Atlantic City, Cohoes, New York, and Providence, Rhode Island. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets, and only there. So let me get back to this. So you mentioned this before, that the Department of Housing and Urban Development estimated back in 2010, I think it was,
Yes.
that you could end homelessness in the United States if you spent $20 billion in the correct way.
Yeah.
That was their estimate, right? So that's going back a few years now. That's 14 years ago. But so in California, we found out that we have spent $24 billion on homelessness over the last 5 years, but they didn't track it.
Right.
They didn't track anything. And so nearly half of Los Angeles's record homeless budget went unspent, the city controller finds. Really? Because they just passed another law. We just voted. So whenever they ask the citizens to vote, hey, do you want to spend more of your tax money to help homelessness and cure homeless? We always vote yes. So they just passed, just this last time, they passed another law saying we're going to spend another 0.5 cent of every tax dollar to go to homelessness. And I'm going to I bet you it's not going to help because there's a homelessness industrial complex. And the more we spend on homelessness, the worse it's getting. And that's a fact.
Yeah.
And it's because, well, watch this interview. This is our friend James Lee. What? He's going to figure this out.
I'm a public administrator. How much do you make? $242,000.
So a public administrator makes $250,000 a year.
Yeah.
Okay. And what does she do?
Can you describe what you do in one sentence? I oversee homeless programs for a very large nonprofit in the city of Los Angeles.
Wow. She makes $250,000 a year overseeing a homeless program for a nonprofit. Sounds like someone's making profits.
Yeah, well, that's what's going on. Say, for instance, Santa Cruz, we had a civil grand jury to investigate where the money went in Santa Cruz. This was before COVID. And they said that it was not possible to audit the homeless program. So our director of our homeless program, he makes roughly the same amount of money. And he has like several $1 million mansion in the foothills and so on. And but they couldn't get showers for homeless people, even though, because they didn't have the money for it. I mean, that's crazy. So and it took them, there's no showers for like 3 years except for in a trailer. But the problem was if you were disabled, you couldn't get into one of the 2 stalls. I mean, these are people that are making massive amounts of money. There's another agency here called Housing for Health, and the director of that also makes like nearly $300,000 a year. And all of these institutions also have, people make, like we have a huge battalion of people that are paid over $150,000 to $200,000 a year just in city government in Santa Cruz to deal with homelessness. But the reality is, it's private citizens that are providing the tents and the sleeping bags. And just like us. And so, I mean, I joke with Ratner, the head of Housing for Health. I go like, I'm the housing authority and the food program in this town because I house more people than the city does, but I house them in pup tents that I get from Big Five and tarps I get from Costco. It's insanity that, and the public really is compassionate for the homeless, but James also has another video.
So let me play this all the way through.
Okay, cool.
I'm a public administrator. How much do you make? $242,000 a year. Can you describe what you do in one sentence? I oversee homeless programs for a very large nonprofit in the city of Los Angeles. That's a big role. And what's your biggest struggle in that job? Not enough housing, not enough housing, not enough housing.
All right, today we're going to expose this entire grift. First, I dug around a little bit, and the nonprofit that she worked for is called LA Family Housing. And according to their IRS Form 990, they received $65 million in government grants last year. And you know how she talked about housing being so important? Well, this is what they're talking about. LA Family Housing is transforming a 1950s motel into apartments for supportive housing. But then you look at the price tag, $60 million for 41 apartments. $60 million. LA has a homeless population of over 75,000, and that's how they think $60 million of taxpayer money should be spent? That's either incompetence or gross negligence, and I'm thinking the latter. Because here's what I think the scheme is with all these affordable housing units that are popping up all over Los Angeles. It's a complete bait and switch scam.
Yeah.
Because here's what's going on. The construction of affordable housing developments is subsidized by public funds. In exchange, rents are regulated by covenants, but these covenants carry an expiration date. And once a covenant expires, a building's owner is not required to pay back any public funds. Rather, he is freed from all regulations which kept rents down, able to extract and hoard all future profits. And in the city of Los Angeles alone, there is an estimated 11,000 affordable housing units, which will convert to market rate within the next 5 years. So these massive public housing projects are nothing but a huge money laundering scheme between these real estate developers and these nonprofit administrators who are making monster salaries, and also politicians who I assume are getting kickbacks, allegedly. I mean, how else would you explain this insane statistic that LA is spending $837,000 to house a single homeless person? So I give these people two options. Either A, actually end homelessness, or B, we should demand to defund this whole boondoggle.
Wow.
Okay, I have to do a follow-up on this lady who makes $250,000 a year combating homelessness, because this story is so much more juicy and corrupt than I had even realized. Let's get into it. Okay, so remember when I said she worked for a nonprofit called LA Family Housing? Well, it turns out she was actually fired from LA Family Housing, according to this lawsuit. Allegedly, she was getting in a little bit of hot water with her boss for starting a consulting business on the side. I checked on LinkedIn, and it looks like she's not running one consulting business. She's actually running two consulting businesses that have to do with housing. Now, of course, she's disputing that's why she was fired. She's claiming that these are the real reasons why she was fired from LA Family Housing. You can pause to read, and this is why she's filing a lawsuit now. Obviously, I'm not privy to exactly what went down, but you can search this lawsuit and read all the details and decide for yourself. But regardless, I wouldn't lose too much sleep worrying about her, because she's now failed upward and is the new chief executive strategist for the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority. That's right, she is now an official government employee. There she is. Funny enough, the face of this new article from the LA Times reporting that a county audit has found lax accounting at the LA Homeless Services Authority. And just for context, the LAHSA annual budget stands at $875 million. About $348 million comes from the county's coffers. It is a massive government agency. And here's what the audit found. Quote, LAHSA, a city-county joint powers agency, failed to establish formal agreements on how and when advances should be repaid, did not always maintain records for capital advances, and could not provide an accurate list of all the contracts and their execution dates. They've apparently also failed to reclaim millions of dollars in cash advances to contractors. And you guys ready for this next part? Remember these consulting businesses that she runs? Well, LAHSA's newly hired chief executive strategist, okay, her, that's who we've been talking about. She, according to state business filings, owns a consulting business, which we knew about, but what we didn't know about is that she owns the consulting business with the leader of one of LAHSA's largest contractors. Come on. This number is starting to make a whole lot of sense now. Why we have to spend $837,000 to house a single homeless person. It's because developers, contractors, nonprofits, and city administrators like her are all in cahoots with one another. I mean, if we just look statewide, $24 billion have been spent on homelessness, with homelessness going up. California, according to the latest statistics, has about 180,000 people who are experiencing homelessness. If we just took the $24 billion and gave it to each homeless person, they would be getting $130,000 each. I'm not saying that I would propose this or if this would be my preferred option, but it is starting to sound like this would be a hell of a lot better idea than what we're doing right now, which I think is just people embezzling hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars each year, allegedly.
And I would say he is absolutely correct. And homeless people and their supporters have been asking this question for years, because there are all these headlines about money for the homeless, and we never see anything for the homeless. It's heartbreaking. So we have 28 luxury condo projects in Santa Cruz, which has a population of 63,000 people. And what they do with their affordable housing money is you're able to not have to ruin your project by having low-income people live in an affordable unit. An affordable unit here means that you make $93,000 or greater. The money goes into some bank account and is held there, but no one is clear where this bank account is or who owns it or what's going on. So if you're supposed to have, by law, like 5 units of affordable housing in your luxury condo project, then you can get out of doing that by paying money into this, trust fund somewhere that no one is clear about what's happening. And I think what James is saying, he also has a great report on what happened with money going to the Cayman Islands through Mayor Todd Gloria in San Diego, used through the Housing Authority. So these scams are happening systematically. There's probably at this California League of Cities, they actually discuss how to divert this money into their own bank accounts. Because it's amazing. But the thing that's also heartbreaking is the suffering. I mean, the suffering of these people on the streets is incredible. We have one friend that was trying to get into drug rehab. She's a 22-year-old young woman, and we are working, trying to help her get off drugs. She so wanted to get off drugs, and then she just died this week in her tent outside the homeless shelter.
And so, again, every time it's put to the citizens, do you want to pay more for your taxes? Do you want to put an extra penny tax on the sales tax, and that'll go towards homelessness? They always say yes. So now we're spending close to $1 billion a year in the county of Los Angeles on homelessness, and homelessness is still going up everywhere you look. What is the answer to this? So to me it looks like it's these public-private partnerships. So you take taxpayer money and you give it to contractors, private companies, and there's no accountability and nothing ever happens to it. Why can't we just have a government agency hire people, and instead of having to farm it out to private contractors? Why can't we just hire people? Like when FDR was president, he hired he created the CCC, right? They went out and they fixed parks and recreation and all kinds of stuff, and they worked for the government, right? It didn't go. So why can't we create a force? We could employ people, and we could get rid of these $250,000 salaries of people who don't do anything except figure out ways to grift even more money from the system. So what do you think is the answer? I mean, we got the money. The problem is not the money. Why we just spent $24 billion in California in 5 years. We have the money. So what would you do if you were the czar of homelessness?
Well, first of all, I would start making wages a living wage. That would cut out a lot of problems of people going into the streets. The other one that I think is universal health care. That would have made a huge difference. There's so many homeless people who refuse to go to the emergency room because if they go to the emergency room, they're going to lose all their belongings. That is a guarantee. So you will own nothing when you leave the emergency room. You've lost your sleeping bag. You've lost your probably like anything that you had when you're only what's on your clothing is all you're going to leave that place, and they're going to send you to a bus stop out in front of the hospital where you're going to sit, and then you've got to go figure out how to get all your stuff back again. So the reality is that if they had universal health care, because a huge percentage of people living on the streets are there because of healthcare debt and crises. Another is a living wage, so you could, and that the price of renting a facility was something you could afford. So that is really where the solution is. Now, in our town, they try to play with that. So what Robert Morbut is complaining about is this housing first model, which is a scam, but he doesn't care that it's a scam aspect of it. He just wants money diverted to these mega shelters that he would then operate, or his company would operate. So the thing is that the homeless industrial complex does not want to solve this problem because they make a huge amount of money. Frances Fox Piven, and I forget her co-author now, she wrote a book, Regulating the Poor, back in the 70s. And it talks about the history of the formation of the homeless industrial complex. And it was rich people, of course, set it up. And particularly by the time it gets to Bill Clinton, where he starts taking Heritage Foundation ideas, like welfare to work and so on, and starting and putting people like even in a bigger bind because they can't pay for childcare, but they got to go to a minimum wage job and so on. And it just kept escalating. But the other thing that's similar to to FDR and doing, they were able to get the New Deal and get public housing because they promised the landowners that it would expire and that they would go to market rate. Now they just have escalated that. So instead of it being 40 years like it was under FDR, it's now like 5 years as it is now, and a lot of it is fake. But the other thing is that there's this huge amount of empty units. So for instance, there's an estimate that there's 10 to 20 empty units in the Bay Area for every unhoused person. So there's no system so those units could have been rented. The other thing is that it is the drug addiction issue and alcoholism and mental health issues. You're going to be mentally ill if you live outside because you're going to have post-traumatic stress disorder no matter what, because you're going to guarding from being robbed, from the cops waking you up all the time. You never get a good night's sleep and anything like that. So essentially, if they actually, instead of building luxury condos, and here in our town, they mobilized Housing Matters and all the nonprofits and the food bank and everything to defeat a measure that would have allowed the local people in Santa Cruz to determine if the housing was in fact low income, and we would vote on making real housing that was for poor people. But they mobilized the homeless industrial complex to defeat the actual solution because they were then pretending, like, as you can see in LA, that if you build these, they're trying to use this idea that we're going to build all this housing, but of course none of the people can afford to get into it. So the basic thing is, when I started Food Not Bombs in 1980, we did a soup line outside the Federal Reserve Bank during the stockholders meeting of the Bank of Boston. And Reagan had been in office for 30 days. And so we're like, man, if Reagan's policies and the policies of these banks continue, there's going to be homeless people standing in line eating at a soup kitchen. So we were going to dress up like hobos and do that. But we didn't organize well enough, so I went to the only shelter in town at the time called the Pine Street Inn, which had about 30 guys sitting there on tile benches and stuff, and I gave a speech about this protest I was going to do the next day outside the bank. And they came, and they said, there's no food for homeless people in Boston. You should stop what you're doing, and you just do Food Not Bombs every day. So what it shows is that there was very few homeless people in 1980 on the streets of America, which is not an issue. By 1988, when we first start getting arrested for feeding the homeless at Golden Gate Park, now it's a crisis, right? That's 8 years of Reagan being in office and cutting funding for human services and education and healthcare, and then you end up with this crisis. It's not like for some reason at the end of 8 years of Reagan, everybody said, oh, urban camping, it's the greatest thing. I think I'll go out and do some heroin and sleep in the streets. No, it's a system that is completely broken, and it's intentional, and it's heartbreaking because the suffering, like a homeless person's life expectancy, is dramatically reduced by the difficulty of living outside.
I think people, like, you see this a lot. We did a segment on a Fox News host who was talking about the people who are homeless. They like it. They like it. Right. They want to live like that. And then, you have to say, no, well, actually 35,000 of them are veterans. 40% of them are families who work. 30% are children. They don't like it. And just the ones you see, the ones that you come in contact with are the ones who are mentally ill and on drugs. And why don't we build drug rehabilitation facilities, right? You get the construction jobs, you get the jobs of the people who would work at those facilities, and you get those people off the street. That never comes up.
No.
So
We tried it in Santa Cruz, but there's a group here called, and every city has it. Our group is called Take Back Santa Cruz. The head of it is the husband of the chief attorney of Google. And anyway, so they blocked. We had a very enlightened head of Department of Health here, Dr. Lev, and he organized this whole thing where we could have safe injection site and immediately put into a drug rehab place in a center where you would live there till you were clean and sober and you had adequate support. But you couldn't get the people like Take Back Santa Cruz. They organized with the city council and the county supervisors to make sure there would not be drug rehab, saying it's enabling the drug users. It's just like when we had another facility that's in the county that is supposed to be for families and veterans. And the neighbors all like, we don't want homeless people living next to us. This is horrible. And the point is, though, when they're living in their apartment, they are no longer homeless people. Your neighbors are now other people living in an apartment near you. It's not like so that's insane. So even the shelter, the one little measly shelter we have at the Armory, the people that were like half a mile away from that place and would never really end up with any interaction with people living there, they stopped that from being a possible place for people to sleep for years because they didn't want homeless people walking by their property. So they've had to make a rule that you have to catch a bus in town and go out to the shelter because you don't. It's insane. So it's like there's been this massive campaign of demonizing the homeless and saying they're all drug addicts, mentally ill, and a danger to you. And that's magnified in the legacy media. At this end by city governments so talk that way. They dehumanize the homeless in the same way. The same language on nextdoor.com to attack the homeless is the same language that the leadership of Israel used to human animals of the Palestinians, making it okay to kill a Palestinian because they're not human. It's a similar ideology and energy for homeless people. Well, they're not real people. They're like drug addicts and mentally ill, so they shouldn't have any rights. And it is really, it's just sad, but because the reality is many, many Americans have family members that are homeless or have been homeless. And we find that the support, when we go out and do the Stop the Sweeps protests, we get honking like crazy, even from people in Teslas and stuff. But we also have people that live in Teslas that eat with us. This is like, Santa Cruz.
So,
it's insanity.
I mean, so again, the two biggest things you want to combat homelessness. I would have a three-pronged. I would raise the wages, minimum wages. I would give people health care, give people a basic form of health care where they don't go bankrupt if they get sick. And the third thing is I would create drug rehab facilities and build new ones and staff them. And that's we're going to spend $24 billion on homelessness anyway. Why don't we spend it on actually doing something? And so it doesn't seem like that it takes a genius to figure out what we need to do. And but in California, almost all the Democratic, it's a Democratic majority legislature, and it's a Democratic governor, and they all ran on Medicare for all, and then they get in power and they never bring it up again, and they never do it. Oh, we can't do it. So they never do it. So here we are. If you want, California, the 5th largest economy in the world, still can't give its own people health care. Just think about that. And they can't take care of their own homeless. Think about that. And they can't take care of their drug addicts who live on the street. But they can put them in prison for $120,000 a cell a year because there's someone lobbying them to do that. And it's called the prison industrial complex. And Joe Biden was a dupe to them. So is governor. Everybody is. They all are. And that's why it's broken. We have a broken system. And so I don't know what it's going to take, but we have 100. Just if you want to see what a country would look like if it was all run by Democrats, come to California. It's the 5th largest economy in the world. And this is what it looks like. So if you think voting Democrat is going to fix things, you are incorrect. Voting Democrat is just look at California. Nobody has health care. Biggest population in the country, homeless population in the country, drug addicts everywhere on the streets, mentally ill people not getting services, and nobody has an idea on how to fix that. Well, I do. If you're going to spend 24,
well, Jimmy, it's so sad. So in this happens everywhere too. So well, first of all, I point out that Food Not Bombs has been arrested only in the most liberal of Democratic-controlled cities, like Tampa, Florida, or Orlando, Florida, or San Francisco, or Santa Monica, so on. That we never get arrested for feeding the homeless in Republican-controlled states or cities. But then the other thing is that they're just every year they'll have like these series of major police sweeps to get rid of the homeless in Santa Cruz, and then they will go, okay, we had to get rid of all these homeless people and they had no place to go, so why don't we have a study session and figure out how to have a solution for homelessness? And they call them smart solutions, but it's run by the homeless industrial complex. So you all meet 3 or 4 times a year to come up with solutions, and they put like pieces of paper all around on the walls, and you write down all your solutions. And then our mayor, who he wasn't a mayor at the time, after they kicked out everybody from this one giant camp, which was saving people's lives, and then people died when, they were in the streets afterwards. But anyway, so they had a study, and they met every Tuesday for 2 years, and they ended up not doing anything. And they do it year after year. And when they were announcing that they were going to do this study, I said, like, just white out the date on the top and put a new date on it, because you already had the 2000 study, and the information from that study ended up being exactly the same as the 2004 study, which ended up being exactly the same as the 2009 study, which, it's because the study, it's always the same. But they don't do any of the things that are written on those sheets of paper, because how are they going to make a lot of money doing the solutions that actually would resolve the crisis? Well, there's too much money in the homeless industrial complex to give it up.
So,
we paid. This is an amazing thing. So in Santa Cruz, the Housing Matters, the big shelter, they spend between $50,000 and $75,000 a year on a parade to end homelessness, where they walk 5 blocks, and then the mayor gives a little speech at the end. And it's probably closer to $75,000. Why? If I had $75,000, I could keep people in tents for weeks. I mean, that's like crazy, that amount of money, But the other thing is that they hire the case managers in these to help you find housing and to help you get into drug rehab and so on. These are usually a person's first job. It doesn't pay a living wage, and the people quit right away. So you see homeless people will have a case manager, and they think they're on their way to housing, and that case manager resigns and goes and does something where they can make money, and then they get a new one, and a new one, and a new one, and it goes on for years that you never get into housing. So my girlfriend is a medical social worker, the medical social worker. That's her job, is putting people into housing. One of our relatives was homeless. It took her 18 months of focusing only on our one relative to get him into housing. And during that 18 months, he was like crashing with us and everything, and that's with a licensed medical social worker focusing on one person. And it took them 18 months to get that person housing. The system is intentionally broken so that what James is saying is true. In every city, in every state, in the whole country, they're just basically robbing the taxpayers to fund a homeless industrial complex with no intention of solving homelessness.
Keith McHenry, the founder of Food Not Bombs. Do you have a website people can go to?
Yeah, foodnotbombs.net. And that's where, at foodnotbombs.net, you could find how to start a local Food Not Bombs group. We're like all over the world. And you can also find where to volunteer with your local chapter. And if you need food, you can contact us and we'll try to help you. We're getting overwhelming number of phone calls because of when United Health provided this like incentive to get extra insurance with in the whatever that is, Part B or whatever Advantage. They gave all their clients a $100 gift card if they signed up. Well, people thought that $100 was going to be. These are all seniors in rural America, mostly in the South, and they thought that $100 was going to come in every week. So after the end of the first month, they called the number on the back. Then the United Healthcare person gives them my phone number, and the last phone call I had from them was a person who said he hadn't eaten in 5 days. I mean, I have these. Sometimes I have 20 of these calls a day. These are just, and I can't even help them. I try to, if they're close to a Food Not Bombs group, we try to help, but we have to send everybody to 211 or to their county offices. And you can't imagine. And many of these people complain that why are we sending money to Ukraine or to Israel when I worked my whole life and paid taxes, and now I have only cat food to eat in my house. I mean, how many cat food stories can you get in a year and not believe you're living in a failed state where Americans who are veterans or who do have housing are eating cat food or their last box of check cereal and stuff? It's insane, and they're half of them are crying.
And people are propagandized into believing that universal health care is some kind of communist plot. And you don't want to have the same people running COVID running your health care. Well, no, the same people who ran COVID are actually running your health care, because the people who, if you think the politicians ran COVID, you're a sucker. It was run by Big Pharma and the health insurance companies who all make billions of dollars off it. And those are the same people who. So the problem, my idea is to get those people out of it. You get the capitalists out from in between your doctor and your patient. And then but we got to go, Keith.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jimmy, for having me on. It's such an honor.
Okay.
And I've watched your show forever, and you gave me so much hope during the COVID hysteria.
I appreciate
I thought I was
that.
the only left winger in the world that could see Big Pharma was scamming us. I'd just been protesting Big Pharma. Then we have COVID, and now we're supposed to like Big Pharma.
It's unbelievable.
I didn't understand it. Yeah.
And
it's weird being a leftist in the U.S.
Yeah, well, because all the lefties turned into right-wing authoritarian Nazis. That's why.
Yeah, it appears to be.
And all it took was Donald Trump to be president. That's all it took.
Yeah. Well, now we finally got people wanting to protest again because we got Donald Trump back.
Is that something?
And they're all now you have people that were like praising Kamala Harris. The next day, they're like, "Oh yeah, it's great that they shot that CEO." Class warfare. I mean, it turned on a dime. And it happened last time. It always happens. It's an endless.
I've made that point a million times. You've heard me make that point that either at least with the Republican in office, we have a chance that the people who call themselves liberals and lefties will protest the next war, maybe, but not when the Democrats doing it. Barack Obama dropped more bombs than George Bush, and nobody noticed. In fact, they gave him a Peace Prize. Nobody noticed. He kicked 5 million people out of their homes while during the banking crisis, and he made sure the bank executives got their bonuses, and nobody noticed. Nobody gave a shit. He didn't give us universal health care with a public option. He gave us a right-wing health care plan that bankrupts you when you get sick. Nobody noticed, and nobody gives a shit. So at least with a Republican in office, that's what I've said since 2016. We have a chance to protest it. But they end up protesting garbage like Russiagate instead of protesting actual things like the Ukraine war, the Palestinian war, homelessness, the lack of health care, the lack of, the open border, flooding, lowering wage, the whole deal. They have the wrong idea about everything. And that's why the country's because they're so easily propagandized. The people who I know, it is so disillusioning that they still think what they see on CNN is the news. They still think what they read in the New York Times is the news. They still think that. They still think Jeff Bezos gives a shit about them and the Washington Post. That is the exact opposite. So anyway, we got to go. Keith, great to talk to you.
Thank you, Jimmy. Okay, take care. Have me back some other time.
Okay, we'll do. Come see us on tour in Los Angeles, Honolulu, Dallas, Texas, Baltimore, Atlantic City, Cohoes, New York, and Providence, Rhode Island. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets, and only there.